So, today's the first day. All these stimulus checks have been going out. I'm talking not just you, everybody out there. You know what that means, right?
Everyone's going to be stimulated?
No, we should have a large influx to our Patreon account now.
Did you just do a shameless plug in the first 10 seconds of this show?
There was no shame in that, but yes, absolutely.
Shameless? I said shameless.
Yeah, I said there's no shame there. Oh, no, yes, I had one of those PBR coffees before we started tonight.
That was pretty good. I had one too. So, man, I thought we were going to start with something else tonight.
You did?
Yeah, but I can't remember what it is.
Like my ventures getting here tonight?
We can start. Well, we could talk about that in a minute.
You got something else first?
No.
So we'll start with that.
All right. We'll have a good show today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's time to hit the trail, lock in those hubs, and throw it into low range. Because you are listening to Wheelin' with Keith and Johnny Orange, broadcasting from the Thin Line Off-Road Studio. They're here to talk about 4x4s, trucks, and everything to do with enjoying the great outdoors. Buckle up. Here's your hosts, Keith and Johnny Orange.
All right, John. Episode 53. We already know what we're going to talk about tonight.
The beginning of the
You
end.
know what? The thing is here, I got to say that, not that I'm an advocate for the other side, the dark side here, but your side didn't look too good today.
The Jeep side?
No, the manual side.
It had nothing to do with that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Nah, I'm pretty confident. So obviously you guys don't know yet. Pegasus had some hiccups on the way here tonight. Recording day almost did not happen. She kind of started losing power, stalled out about halfway to the studio tonight. So I was able to get it started, turned around, head back. It stalled out 3 more times on my way home. Lost power 5 or 6 times.
Well, I get that it's a diesel, but you do realize you still have to put fuel in it every once in a while.
Oh, it's got over half a tank of fuel. The problem was, and I discussed this on one of the episodes, I used up an old fuel can. There's a lot of sediment, a lot of crap on the bottom, and I think there was probably a little bit of water at least mixed in with that or something that clogged up the fuel filter.
Well, that's why you got to drain the water off first, and then you got to filter it through like a coffee filter or something.
Yeah, I stupidly relied on the little screen on the end of my jerry can filler. So what I'm gonna?
No.
Yeah, obviously. No. So the problem is, I've got 3 filters on this thing. One on the pump, an external one outside of the fuel tank, and then there's one on the return side of it on the engine.
Okay.
I only have 2 out of the 3 filters. I'm pretty certain there's a bypass, an automatic bypass kind of thing on the one that's in the fuel tank.
Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with TJ fuel tanks, but I'll believe you.
Because I'm still running the gas
stock
pump.
TJ fuel tank?
Yeah,
okay,
the stock,
all right.
The only modification of the fuel tank itself is a return line that I plumbed in there.
Oh, okay.
Everything else is still stock TJ.
Didn't have a fuel line return already in it?
No, they don't.
TJ's a returnless system?
Yep.
Ew.
It's got a pressure regulator on the top, and it just sends out. That's all it does. So aside from that, that's still stock. So I'm going to replace both the other fuel filters. I'm certain it's going to be the nice external high-performance one that I installed. The other one's probably fine, but I've got it, so I'm going to swap it. I haven't done it yet this year anyways. And then run some diesel 911, cross my fingers, and see what happens.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, that's all you can do sometime. But
yeah, needless to say, it was an interesting drive home. I've never popped the clutch to get this one started, though. I did that.
Did it work?
It did, yeah. I
stalled out at a stop sign or at a rolling stop or something?
No, in the middle of a turn with oncoming traffic.
Oh, yeah.
I had to crank that wheel and pray, man.
Yeah,
and,
that'll happen.
Yeah, I let off the clutch. It fired right up. And from that point to where my parking space in the driveway, it was fine. No issues whatsoever.
Well, of course, that's the beauty of a manual transmission. At least until they started putting electronic over controls and things like that. But you can... an old manual transmission up to mid-1980s before they started putting the clutch disengagement in there, or the clutch safety switch. You can pop a clutch in gear if you have a dead starter, dead electrical system, whatever, and you can fire that baby
I've had
up.
to do that with Project XJ pre all the work a few times. It was the starter and the battery had a lot of issues on that. It was the starter solenoids they'd cake up with corrosion, so we had to clean them a lot. And yeah, more than a few times. I remember we were at some guy's house. You were getting boulders or rocks or something my mom found on Craigslist, and it wouldn't start. Turn the key, nothing happens. And it's like, well, it's a manual. Guy's like, well, I got a tractor I can push it with, see if we can get it started. So the guy bumped the back with a backhoe or a tractor, fired right up, and away we went.
Exactly.
It was great. I love them.
I've grown up on a farm and having manuals regularly up until even now.
Yeah.
I've done that numerous times.
You know, when you're at a bonfire in the sticks, and a mutual friend of ours, Jason,
Okay.
he used to have a manual Focus, Ford Focus.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay.
And we were right in the middle of nowhere. We had
Better
no
than an
stereos.
automatic Focus, but okay. Yeah. All right.
So we were out there one night. He was just cranking the music all night. You know, daylight's coming up, time to go home. Car wouldn't start.
Okay.
There were 4 of us, varying stages of consumption of alcoholic beverages in the night. It's like,
All right.
we'll push start it. So we went backwards and tried it, and then we went forwards and tried it, and we could never seem to get it going fast enough. Then he realized he had the parking brake on.
That also has a clutch safety switch.
Yeah, well, he had the clutch in. I mean, he knew we got it going.
Yeah.
We hadn't been able to get it going fast enough.
Oh, okay.
So we got just enough speed, and he dumped it, fired right up, and all was fine.
Okay. Well, I was going to tell you
So,
when I was in high school. I was driving my dad's old 53 Chevy pickup truck, which I still own today.
Nice.
Straight 6, 3 on the tree, 6-volt system. The
Never
6-volt
driven one of those.
system in that thing was a nightmare. It would
believe it.
constantly, it barely had enough, even with a fresh 6-volt battery, it barely had enough power to start the vehicle.
Oof.
And so it would die randomly all the time, and we would push start that thing.
Nice.
Well, I was dating this girl. I'm out at her place. We went somewhere. I don't remember where we went.
So that was the story. It won't start, and things just kind of went.
No, it wasn't one of those.
Isn't that how the Thriller music video?
I was
started?
trying to
His
get
car
her
going?
home. I think it was a curfew thing or something. But
right.
pouring rain. I cannot get the truck started. I mean, it's just cranking out, just not enough.
Like a cold diesel in the winter.
So I said to her, hey, we're going to push start this. Mm-hmm. Showed her, I says, all you got to do is you got to push your foot down on this, showed her the clutch pedal. I said, I'll put it in gear here, first gear. I said, I'm going to push it from the back. It was a pretty light truck. I said, as soon as I yell, you let go of the clutch pedal, and this thing should start. And then as soon as it starts, push the clutch pedal back in. Pretty simple instructions, if I say so myself.
I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We tried it like 2 or 3 times, and she's freaking out. And she's like, I can't do this. She's like, I'll just get out and push. And I'm like, no. And she's like, yeah, I'll do this. So sure enough, here's my girlfriend back behind me, pushing by the tailgate of this truck. We're pushing up this dirt road. Sure enough, we got it started. But
that's so rude, Keith. Come on.
I tried.
You made your girlfriend start your truck.
After that, though, in my defense, and she hated this thing. Her mom, as a birthday present, bought her a Toyota Tercel, I think it was.
Heard of those?
It wasn't the 4x4 version, the wagon that we've talked about at the museum, but it was just this boxy little 80s, and it was a stick shift. It was a 5-speed stick. She actually took me out with her. She called me up. She's like, hey, let's go check out this Toyota.
Nice.
I'm going to buy it for the girlfriend. I'm not going to say her name, but I'm going to buy it for her birthday. So we go out and we check it out, and I'm like, I don't think she's going to want to drive a stick. And she's like, oh, no. She'll definitely want to drive. And she's like, it's a free car. And I'm like, I don't know. She's tried to drive my truck, and it didn't work out so well.
Well, there's a difference.
Well,
there.
yeah. So she bought her that car,
Nice.
and she did drive it poorly for about 3 months until she blew the clutch out of it.
Oh.
And that was the end of that car.
Bummer.
And they decided not to put a clutch in it, and she got an automatic after that.
Yeah.
She got a Plymouth Neon
Oh, that's an oldie.
I know.
My dad had one of those.
Back then it wasn't.
Yeah.
But
I don't remember the year, but my dad had a Plymouth one. I don't remember why, but I remember we had another one after that wasn't neon.
all right.
That's all I remember. Let me rephrase. I'm sorry. That was a Dodge, I mean.
Well, they had the Dodge and the Plymouth neon, which is weird because they have the
Yeah.
same name for both vehicles.
Yeah, that's, I mean, he had a Plymouth neon, and then shortly thereafter a Dodge neon.
Well, so here we are. We're telling these stick stories. That's obviously a benefit of having a manual. This is kind of our manual versus automatic episode, and the reason why episode 53, which, we were talking with Chad at Quick Draw Brand earlier today, and he pointed out the fact that we failed miserably.
Yep, we dropped the ball.
We dropped the ball.
We dropped a few balls here.
Are playing on the numbers here. Episode 53. If you're going to play with the 53 number, one option is you could talk about the ill-fated late 97 to early 99 53 Cummins block that was known to just crack and throw the side of the block out.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the story at that point. I mean, we could sit there. I don't know that we could talk an hour about how to repair those things. I've never even repaired one personally.
Throw it out and start over.
Well, that's the ideal. There are repair kits that involve this big tube of JB Weld and some bolts and all sorts of crap. And
I mean, I've seen videos on Facebook and YouTube of people repairing like cracked heads. Grind it down, weld it in, but then you got to remachine the whole thing.
It's basically the same thing. Yeah. The other thing we could have talked about was the 53 Series Detroit, which was sold as a economy version of the 71 Series that
was there an 853 or were those were only 6 cylinders?
I think there was. I could be wrong on that, but I know that they had the 6V53.
I knew that one.
They had the
we have one.
We have one at the museum, the cutaway engine.
Yep.
They had the 453, they had the 253, they had a bunch of different 53 series, which you would think the 53 came before the 71, but the 71 came first in the Detroit diesels, the two-stroke Detroit diesels.
Yeah. The boat that I works on has 2 of those, 8V71s.
Okay, yeah, great engines. And I think
the size of those engines makes me look small.
We can't drop the ball. I think for episode 71, we need to do a whole 2-stroke Detroit diesel episode.
I am so for that.
That's what we need to do. So
yes.
That's what we'll do. We'll cover some of the 53 history at that point too. But in 1953 doesn't seem, besides the fact that I had a truck that I had my girlfriend push start.
That's awesome.
Does not seem like a very important year. And maybe even to you, it's not that important of a year.
No, based on our topic.
Yeah, based on our topic.
Yeah, no, that was a bad year. Again, I mentioned this to a friend of mine, and he gave us the title for tonight's episode, The Beginning of the End.
The beginning of the I like that. Now, you got to remind me when we go to type the show notes up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, Jason, this one goes out to you. Thank you.
The beginning of the end. 1953 was the very first year that you could get an automatic transmission in a civilian pickup truck.
Yeah.
Now, I'm using that as a what would you call that? Disclaimer there. A civilian pickup truck. Because, in a nutshell, or we might as well even just talk a little bit about the history, because maybe some of our listeners would like to know about the early history of automatics. You and I are big fans of automatics, but I know about them.
So this is going to be an interesting debate, and I think we're going to wait till at least after this first commercial to bring the special on.
We still got a minute here, though, right?
Oh, okay. yeah. I'm just saying.
So this
would be a very one-sided debate otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. In the late 30s, multiple companies knew that some sort of automatic shifting transmission, they didn't even have a name for it at that point yet, was going to be
the future.
Part of the future, yeah. And General Motors started a program and developed what they called the hydromatic transmission. There were others that developed various clutchless systems prior to that. But the first fully automatic transmission was the GM hydromatic transmission.
Okay.
In 1940...
Someone to blame.
Yeah, there you go. Do we blame General Motors? It's all your fault, GM. It's all your fault.
I still like your gas trucks, though.
Oh, okay. So, it was a joint venture between Oldsmobile and Cadillac.
Okay.
The two divisions worked together to develop the hydromatic transmission. However, it was decided because the Cadillacs were like an up-end, higher-end vehicle, and they weren't 100% sure that this was going to work out. They decided to test the program in the Oldsmobiles first.
Okay.
So the 1940 Oldsmobile is the first vehicle you can get a fully automatic transmission in.
Yeah.
The following year in 41, you could get them in a Cadillac as well.
Okay.
Now, in 40 and 41, between the two makes, they sold over 200,000 automatic transmissions, the Hydromatic.
Yeah.
Pretty successful there, and it was. But then, of course, World War II breaks out. Pearl Harbor, 1941, December 6th, I think, December 7th, 1941.
Well, that seems like something we should really know offhand.
I believe it's December 7th. December 7th, 1941. The U.S., Pearl Harbor in Hawaii is bombed. The U.S. enters the war. At this point, within about 6 months, U.S. automobile production stops for civilian use. However, GM goes right into building military vehicles, and one of the things that they could do right away was to use some of the technologies that already developed.
Yeah.
So they took their Hydromatic transmission and used it in 2 tanks that they were building for the war effort. One of them was the Chaffee tank. I don't know. I don't remember the M series
about those.
But there was 2. I think one was a Sherman, or maybe the other one was a Chaffee. But they had these 2 fairly light duty, high speed tanks, but they had an automatic Hydromatic transmission.
See, that's something I never would have considered with a tank, is a manual versus automatic. I don't know why I've never contemplated that.
Well, obviously, all the early tanks were manuals, World War I. And then World War II, they had these 2 versions that had the Hydromatic. They were a success. They didn't have many problems with them. And so after World War II, 1945, GM, end of 45, early 46, was able to use, actually in their advertising, that their automatic transmissions were battle-tested. And that's actually what they called them, battle-tested automatics.
Nice.
So the GM Hydromatic. Now, the weird thing about the GM Hydromatic is it didn't have a park provision, but it was a 4-speed automatic, which we didn't see again until the 1970s. So it was, they had this 4-speed automatic, and when you parked it, you put it down into reverse. That was the park engagement.
Okay.
It didn't go anywhere. That worked out great. Well, then the military said, "Hey, we had such great luck with the tanks. We want to try it in something else." So GM was building the 6x6 deuce and a halfs at the time. So for 1950, you could get the GM Hydromatic in the deuce and a half, the GMC 2.5 ton truck. So that was the first, I guess, rubber tired vehicle, or rubber tired truck.
Okay.
Would have been the GMC 6x6. So that's why, I know it was kind of a long story there, but that's,
it's all good.
That's why when we say civilian versus domestic, the first time that you could get a civilian automatic was 1953 in GMC only, not Chevrolet. GMC and Chevrolet, even though they were using the same cabs.
So were they partnered back then?
They were.
Okay.
GMC and Chevrolet were using the same sheet metal, the same cabs, the same frames. However, they were using different engine and transmission combinations.
Okay. Makes sense.
Chevrolet used their own driveline. GMC used their own driveline. GMC took they had a larger straight 6. Chevrolet had a 235, and then prior to that, a 216 straight 6. GMC had larger engines, and they paired that with the Hydromatic, and in 1953 was the very first time you could get an automatic transmission in a pickup truck. Like you said, it's the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Surviving examples of an automatic in a 53 GMC are extremely rare.
I believe it.
Now, something we put on This Day in Off-Road History posts, you could also in 53 get a NAPCO conversion and get a 4-wheel drive NAPCO conversion, both the GM and GMC and Chevrolet trucks. I did probably way too many hours, probably 2-3 hours of research.
Go rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to find out if any 1953 GMC NAPCOs exist with a Hydromatic transmission. Could not find one. I could not find a picture of one, could not find records of one.
Well, thank God for that.
So was there an automatic 4x4 in 1953? We don't know.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a listener out there that says, yeah, my uncle's got one.
Send us pictures.
We want to see it.
Absolutely,
it might be the only one out there. In fact, even better, tell your uncle we need to have it in the museum. In the Mora. It needs to be there.
Well, how about real quick? Let's take a quick break here. We'll come back in a few minutes, and we can get back a little more on what's going on with the rest of the show here.
Sure, absolutely.
That sounds good. We'll see you in a minute.
Hey, it sounds like it's time to swap out that old engine for something better, John.
Yeah, man, but I have so much into my trans and transfer case set up already. I don't want to change those too.
Sounds like you need to call Quick Draw brand adapters. They specialize in conversion bell housings for nearly all diesel and gasoline engines, including the new 2.8R Cummins.
I like weird engines. I want something different.
Then you definitely need to visit quickdrawbrand.com today. They have those hard-to-find parts. They also have used diesel engines available. You can call them at 513-446-9654.
Cool, I'll do that. See what they have. Thanks.
All right, before you so rudely took and cut me off there.
I'm sorry.
I got into the whole history thing.
I know.
But anyway, so 53. 53, like
Bad
you said,
year.
in your beginning of the end, in your own words.
No, not mine. Not mine. Courtesy of Mr. Jason.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Jason. And what's funny is you would think that it would be a trickle effect, and it kind of was because automatics in pickup truck sales was pretty light up until the mid-'60s, and then like pretty much after the mid-'60s, over half of them were automatics.
Yeah.
But the very next year, Chevrolet, Ford both offered automatics in their pickup trucks.
See, I wonder one big thing about them.
What's that?
I know how it is when I go from driving my Jeep to something else for, if it's an extended couple of days or whatever, or even for a start, you still have that muscle memory with the left leg. How many accidents were caused by people slamming on the brakes those first couple of years when the automatics started coming out and people were still reaching for that pedal?
Well, true enough. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. Maybe I haven't, or maybe I've told you the story, but my first car was a 55 Chevy Bel Air, 3-speed on the column. Drove that car pretty much for about a year and a half, 2 years without driving anything else.
Yeah.
And this is the 90s. This was an antique car at that point.
I know the story.
Yeah.
I love this story.
And so I did tell you this before.
A few times.
But I think the clutch went out, and I was doing the clutch on the car. And I borrowed my mom's 1980 Oldsmobile station wagon. And I'm driving down the road. I remember exactly where I was. I was actually right by the Clay Township Police Station. I'm driving by, and I just absentmindedly grabbed the shifter because it was a 3 on the tree in my car, not in her Oldsmobile. Yeah. Grabbed the shifter, threw it into park at about 40, 45 miles an hour, and jammed. Yep. It had that big 70s, early 80s GM brake pedal that was like the size of a toaster, and just jammed on that with my left foot. So I slammed on the brake and jammed that thing into park, doing like 40, 45 miles an hour. And it just made the most awful clicking, screeching sound. The rear tires locked up. It was a whole nightmare. I realized my mistake within seconds, threw it back into drive. It seemed to be okay for about 2 weeks until the trans went out.
As I recall, wasn't your mom like on vacation or something and you had to fix this?
No. That was when I stole the engine out of Dad's dump truck. No. But that one, that Oldsmobile had a 3.8 Buick engine in it, same that you have in your Commando.
Yeah. Well,
or different version. Yeah. Had the last version of
mine's the predecessor to that. Yeah.
So it had the Buick Olds Pontiac bell housing pattern on it. We took it to a local shop. They took apart the trans. They said it was not rebuildable. The planetary had exploded.
Really?
And it split the case.
I wonder why.
Yeah, no kidding. And they searched everywhere, and I think it had like a 200 R4. It had like an oddball transmission in it. They could not find one, so they eventually took a transmission out of a GMC van with an adapter plate, put it in the Oldsmobile, and that's the transmission that thing had in it for the rest of its life. But
that is awesome. Yeah, I love that.
I destroyed the trans of that Oldsmobile, that poor car.
Nice.
But hey, Matt at Brackets, if you're listening, you probably remember that old Cutlass I used to drive. Matt at Brackets is a huge Olds fan. He's got a bunch of Oldsmobile stuff.
Nice.
And that was how I killed Mom's automatic.
Wasn't
back
there
in the day.
something about this? and I don't remember if we talked about this on air or just somewhere else we were, but as I recall, there was something about those engines that the transmissions didn't last past a certain mileage, and you were talking to your mom like years after you sold it, and then you finally admitted what happened with it.
You know, I don't remember, like, I did eventually admit to her what happened to that thing, but it took almost 20 years.
Yeah, it was like, that thing lasted forever. You know, this and this normally go wrong, and it never did.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a reason for that.
Yeah. It was. I
love it.
I don't remember the first part of what you're talking about, but it took me about 20 years to admit to Mom that I destroyed the transmission in her car.
I love that. That's great.
So, anyways, back to what we're talking about. 1954, you could get an automatic in. We're talking about pickup trucks specifically here because passenger cars, like I said, 1940, you could start getting them in. But pickup trucks, you could get them. I tried to look up Dodges, and I got some conflicting information. It looked like around 62 to 64 is when Dodges could first get an automatic.
The longest holdout. I have more appreciation for Dodge.
There might be a 50s Dodge out there with one in it, but I don't know for sure. But it did look like that it took till the 60s till Dodge went on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is GM had spent, or Chevrolet had spent a ton of money, ton of time developing their own automatic, separate from what Oldsmobile and Cadillac had developed. Mm-hmm. They had developed the Hydromatic. Chevrolet developed the Power Glide.
Okay.
However, the first series of Chevrolet trucks had Hydromatics in them. The Power Glide was deemed to be too weak for the pickup trucks.
Yeah.
Eventually, there were Power Glides in pickups in limited numbers.
Yeah.
But the Hydromatic was the pickup truck version that they used for a number of years.
I got something that's bugged me for a long time, and this seems like a good episode to bring this up in.
Sure.
I've heard the term, like, automatically shifted manual.
Well,
or people that'll convert an automatic to shift manually.
Okay, so the valve...
Is that something separate, or is it like a mechanical versus hydraulic shifting? What's the deal with that? What is it?
Going to depend.
I have no idea.
Going to depend on the transmission that you're talking about.
Okay.
But generically speaking, the valve body in an automatic transmission is some form of hydraulically controlled and or electronic solenoids that control hydraulic pressure.
Okay.
And that's your automatic function.
Yeah.
Internally, up until the early 90s, it was all done mechanically. And then in the early 90s, they started to switch over to computers, and the computers would run the electronic solenoids in the transmission.
See, that's what's always thrown me. Is I'm born in the end of the 80s. You know, so anything in my car knowledge has always been the, solenoids or hydraulics with that. I never realized there was anything before that.
Yeah, so, like, speaking of GM specifically, GM was all hydraulically controlled and a mixture of also a cable that they ran up through the 700 R4 series of transmission, which was the last non-computer controlled automatic transmission. And it also has the... designation of that and the 200R4 are the only two overdrive automatics that are not computer controlled. So if you're going to build a rig like a Jeep or a hot rod or whatever, and you want overdrive, which in this day and age when gas prices are higher, you pretty much want overdrive. That's your only option. Unless you want to run a harness with a computer, you're going to be running a 200R4 or a 700R4.
See, I've heard the 700R4s. I have no interest in an automatic ever, so I don't learn about them.
Exactly. In all my years of tinkering and swapping and building stuff, I have only ever swapped one. I've never gone stick to automatic. Thank God I have never done that.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Good man. Good man.
But I have done a TH400 3-speed non-overdrive transmission. I have swapped that out because I had an 87 Suburban with a 454 big block and a TH400. The TH400 went out. It is the only vehicle I have ever gone smaller in size on the engine with. I pulled that all out, and I put in a 350 TBI gas engine with a 700 R4.
Nice.
That was for my ex-wife. She drove it for a little bit. It was an okay vehicle. It got a lot better mileage with the small block and the 700 R4. But
yeah.
So anyways, you know, I'm not a huge automatic trans guy. You're not an automatic trans guy at all.
I've removed 2.
You've removed them, huh?
Yes.
Just threw them away?
Well, I sold them.
I've converted.
I rescued my OM 617. I rescued out of an automatic Mercedes car. Mm-hmm. And then I salvaged out a 94 Grand Cherokee that had the 318. I had a guy from like Grand Rapids, I think, that wanted the transmission.
Okay.
Came all the way out for that. And yeah, I had another guy wanted the engine, so I split them.
Okay.
So yeah, I've removed 2.
All right.
And hope to remove more and fix them properly, put a manual in there in the future.
Personally, as I think I've talked in the podcast before, for my own personal use, I have never had an automatic transmission rebuilt. For my ex-wife, I did.
Yeah.
We rebuilt an automatic transmission in her GMC Jimmy. For me, every time I've had an automatic transmission vehicle and the trans has gone out, I've pulled it out and gone manual.
Good call.
I've done that at least a half a dozen times.
Yeah.
So for me, I've gone automatic to manual. But, the argument there, and you and I really can't even argue about it, because if we're speaking honestly, is something we've always done on the Wheelin' Podcast is there's shows out there where somebody just for the hell of it will play devil's advocate. We've never really done that.
Not in a serious sense.
No, not really.
Mess around, but
mess around a little bit. But I mean,
excuse me.
I'm not going to sit here and say I'm pro automatic.
I would never say that.
Or you,
I would never lie to
or.
our listeners like
you
that.
and I are exactly. We're both manual transmission fans.
100%.
And so. I know we tried just before the show. We had somebody we wanted to call who not necessarily is pro-automatic, but he's gotten more of a automatic.
He's got more of the business sense side of it.
Yeah. And we might be able to bring him onto the Patreon after show. And if we do, we promise this is going to be probably one of the most interesting Patreon after shows we've ever done.
If what we're planning goes well. Spend the $2 and watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
We might even make that one public.
Yeah, we might.
I mean, it will be. So
it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, this was not a huge automatic transmission history. I can speak semi-intelligently about some of the automatic transmissions. I think we would be better for a future episode to talk about good automatics versus bad automatics, because I'm more knowledgeable on that.
I might be absent that day.
Well, no, what I'm saying, you can still talk about it, but what I'm saying is there is, throughout all of at least the truck and off-road history, there's maybe a dozen automatics that are pretty good automatic transmissions. And there's just as many that are terrible, and you would never want to swap them in your rig.
I believe that. I know there's a couple of those that are like with the XJs. There's like a good one and a bad one.
Well, yeah, like the AW4 is a good, 3-speed automatic.
Like a 32 RH or something.
Something like that, yeah. And that's a good example.
Yeah.
Same thing with GM. The 700R4 automatic overdrive is a pretty decent transmission and still up to about 350 horsepower. After that, you don't want to put a 500 horsepower engine in front of it. It's just going to cook that transmission.
Yeah.
The 200R4, if you've got an absolutely bone stock engine in front of it, it'll probably survive in a lightweight rig. It's a popular swap for guys that do a V6 swap on a Suzuki Samurai.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you would not want to put a 200R4 in, say, for example, even a TJ. You wouldn't want to put a 200R4 in a TJ because you're looking maybe 4,000 pounds. You're going to probably cook that transmission on your first run.
I believe it.
So,
But it's TJ. It should never have an automatic anyways.
Well, I agree.
That's an abomination. It's an abomination. Lordy, that's an abomination. I don't know where I'm going with that.
I don't know either, but I think, like I said, future episode.
Yeah.
But, 53, like we said, going back to 53, this is episode 53.
Hit the mic, man. What did the mic do to you?
It was the beginning of the end. Now, as you and I know, and we spoke on, man, I am drawing a blank right now. We did an episode where we talked about the last automatics, the last manuals.
Yep, it was a few ago.
Yeah. As we know, in 2010 was the last year for Ford where you could get
blocked the news from my mind.
You could get a manual transmission. Mm-hmm. GM, I think, could be wrong here. I think it was like 12 or 13 last year for an automatic or manual transmission. Mm-hmm. And then Dodge, Ram trucks, because they eventually became Ram trucks. Last year, 2019, the very last 6-speed manual Dodge full-size truck rolled off the line.
Hey, you know who still got manual transmissions, though?
Toyota.
Jeep.
Well, Toyota and Jeep. But what I'm saying is full-size trucks, actual trucks like you would use for work. Mm-hmm. They're gone.
Yeah, that's just wrong.
And we've done that in episodes before where we've talked that now, in fact, I think Toyota and Jeep are the only two you can get a manual transmission and 4-wheel drive. And then Nissan, you can get a manual transmission and 2-wheel drive.
That makes me so sad.
I know. They're dying. They're dying. They're dead, man. They're dead.
I refuse to believe that. I won't let it happen.
Well, how are you going to bring them back?
I'll rebuild the old ones. I will scrounge and scavenge every scrapyard until I have exhausted the last available parts of the AX-15 if I have to.
You know, and the funny thing is that...
And then when those are exhausted, I'll move on to another one.
A lot of guys don't necessarily know, but I think in the Jeep world, the AX-15 was the pinnacle of the manual transmission.
Yes, without a doubt.
In the full-size world, if you're a 5-speed fan, the NV4500 was the pinnacle. 6-speed, maybe the G56 or the MV5600. But
I don't know much about the 6-speed ones.
Not the MV6, the ZF6.
Yeah, but I don't know much about the 6 speeds, but the Jeep ones obviously I know.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is the NV4500 out of production. Mm-hmm. The AX-15 though is still being produced.
They brought it back. It was out for a while, but they brought it back.
That's what I'm saying.
That's the key.
Only as a replacement, but you can still get a brand new AX-15.
What does that tell you about the longevity, reliability, and just overall popularity of that one versus everything else, too?
Same thing goes with the Toyotas. The H55 5-speed, I believe the last year in foreign markets, Australia, Africa, you could get an H55 5-speed. It was somewhere around 2016 or 17.
Yeah.
You can still get a brand spanking new one from a Toyota dealer in the U.S. You can walk into a U.S. dealer and say, here's the part number. I need this transmission. And it might take a month to get there.
Yeah.
But you can get a brand spanking new H55 5-speed.
That's awesome.
That's, they're still... And then look at what really was interesting to me was that the new Jeep JK, not JK, JL.
Yeah.
The new JL, when it came out, now has a 7-speed manual transmission.
How did I not know about that?
They took the time to design a whole new manual transmission. They replaced that GS360 or whatever it's called. This. They now have a 7-speed. It's behind a 4-cylinder turbo engine, not available behind the diesel, but you can get a manual transmission. I thought the 6-speed was going to be the end of the run.
Yeah.
They now have a 7-speed.
I'm going to have to look into that. I know nothing about that. I've never even heard or fathomed of that.
Yeah, it's just one more gear for you to swap or shift now.
And a brake.
Well, anyways, I think producer Andrew's telling us it's break time.
Yeah.
I think we've gone way over.
That's okay.
We'll wrap up after this, but folks, thank you for listening. We're going to we're going to talk a little more after break.
We'll see you in a minute.
Puppies are cute. Spiders are not. Spiders are creepy and ugly, but what will you do? You will call ABC Home and Commercial Services. The Spider Fighters can service your home for these unwelcome guests. ABC Spider Fighters will provide the solution for your spiders, wasps, box elder bugs, Asian lady beetles, cluster flies, and all your visiting insects. Call now for a prepaid discount. ABC Home and Commercial, the Spider Fighters. 810-794-5678.
So what's with the shirt here? You run out of your thin line off-road stuff already or something?
I probably did. I've been wearing my TLO stuff. And
so did you finally wash it? Because that smell that was here when I first got here is gone. So I'm wondering if that wasn't you, maybe.
I haven't taken a shower in 24 hours, but
I'm sure they can probably notice that there too. Oh, man.
I ran up before this episode. I was still wearing my work clothes. I still haven't showered from the day. And I reached in to grab something black, and I saw this. I was like, whatever, I'll throw this on. This is the symbol I'm showing to our YouTube listeners, 86 Noodles. They're a southeastern Michigan local band. They're kind of a cover band. They do a lot of 80s, 90s, early 2000s rock. You've seen them in person.
Yeah, they're awesome group, great music. They do a very good job.
They have got to be one of the most
show.
high energy. They jump around like crazy, and it's Joe and Dave. It's funny because Joe and Dave Matthews.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, like the Dave Matthews Band.
Yeah.
But their band is 86 Noodles, and we've seen them in person. Personally, I've seen them probably 20 times. I don't know how many.
I'm at like 3 now.
3 or 4 or something.
Yeah, I've been with you guys a few times.
Great band. They gave me one of these T-shirts a while ago. It's one of my favorite black T-shirts, and they got a cool logo. It's kind of got like the Medusa on it.
Yeah, I like it.
And I don't know, cool
Mine
band.
is gray.
Well, yes, you have the Carhartt brand.
Yes,
actually, did you know that the Carhartt mansion is just north of here?
I did not.
Yeah, the lady that owns Carhartt.
Can I get a discount if I pick my shirts up there rather than order online or like Tractor Supply?
And this is probably like 10 years, so maybe things changed. But 10 years ago, the lady who owned Carhartt, she had a mansion 40 miles north of here on the lake.
That's cool.
Yeah, so.
Nice.
My dad's company used to service some stuff out there. So
nice.
But anyways, back to our automatic manual stuff.
All right, that's what we were doing.
We covered pretty much everything. Well, actually, no, we didn't really talk about pros and cons on the trail. In the beginning of the episode, we talked about how you can bump start a
bump. I see what you did there.
Yeah, bumping my mic again. You can bump start. Someday we need these headsets or something, man.
We're working on it.
You can bump start a manual transmission if you have no power or whatever. You can starters out. You can bump start it, and I've done that on the trail several times. In fact, I was in northern Canada once in my old GMC Jimmy that was on 1-ton axles, and the starter fried. Oof. I had somebody pull start me, and I drove that thing. Wheeled it hard for like 20 miles till I got back to a Canadian Tire.
Nice.
And replaced the starter.
Nice.
Which, by the way, I hope that Canadian Tire will someday be a sponsor of Wheelin'. But your prices on the starter for a 1993 GMC Jimmy are astronomical. I can get one
in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, I can get one in the United States for like $90. You guys charge me like $450 Canadian, which is like $300 US.
That's why everybody near Port Huron comes to Port Huron to get all their parts.
That is the most money I've ever spent on a starter, and I bought starters for diesels.
The place that I worked at, the car dealer, we have, I think it was like 3 or 4 customers that come from Canada for vehicle servicing and repairs.
Yeah.
And certain repairs we have to actually find the Canadian requirements on.
Oh, okay.
Because they're different than here. It's crazy. But it's that much cheaper. It's worth it for them to make that drive.
Yeah, save $200. Heck yeah.
Oh, they sit there for like 3-4 hours on some of these repairs waiting for everything to be done. And it's still cheaper.
Yeah.
It's sad.
That was
whatever. We won't get into the politics.
Yeah.
Not there.
If you want some politics, listen to the Patreon after show to this episode 53 after show.
I'll say a quick hint of this. Some of you may see this live. Some of you may not. So if you're not seeing, if you're
Not this episode live.
no, the next part.
The Patreon after
Yeah, the Patreon. If you see that before you hear this episode, that's why.
Yeah.
But this will still be available.
We're going to attempt to go live. We're going to have
We're
some
gonna try
fun with
something
it.
new and different, and hopefully it doesn't completely, totally backfire.
It might. That's
It'll
what
be
we do.
interesting. It'll be interesting, to say the least.
I mean, it could backfire like my 1985 Omni did and damn near burned to the ground.
Oof. That doesn't sound fun. Anywho.
So anyways, I guess wrapping up this episode, if you're a listener, that Johnny and Orange and I are big fans of manual transmissions. But we would like to hear your argument for one way or the other. If you're like a hardcore automatic guy or gal, or you're a hardcore manual guy or gal, and you have your reasons, we would like you to go on 4x4 Talk on Facebook. Join the 4x4 Talk Facebook group. It's growing every single day. Join that group and be like, hey, you guys are wrong. Automatics rock. Here's why. And show us some pictures. We love action pictures.
Oh, yeah.
If you got pictures of you out in the mud or the rocks or whatever, if you could say, hey, I would have never gotten through this with the manual, or I would have never gotten through this with an automatic, show us. Let us know what you are doing with your transmission. That is the biggest difference in a rig. I mean, we all build axles pretty similarly.
Yep.
We build engines, but it seems to be it's like the Republican and Democrat of the off-road world is automatic versus
I
manual.
like that analogy. I really do.
You do. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It's a very divisive.
Well, I will say this much about it. Had I had an auto, I probably wouldn't have made it home today. I mean, it would have been a long drive.
yeah.
Because the only way I was able to keep that thing going was coast a little downshift and try and run it high idle.
Well,
And that's the only thing that kept it going at a few points.
let me say this. I have wheeled a multitude of vehicles. I've never hardcore, like none of my quote unquote wheeling rigs have ever been automatics. But I have wheeled 3 vehicles moderately that had automatics. My first one that I ever wheeled with an automatic, I had a 1988 F350 Ford with a 460 big block and a C6 automatic. Now that is a bulletproof automatic.
Yeah.
I only took it on really one big, but maybe 2 wheeling runs. The automatic never failed me.
Yeah.
Great automatic. The engine failed me, but and shout out to Jim Kitson there for pulling me out of the Mounds Off-Road Park. My second automatic that I took off-road was my 1996 FZJ80. I say Land Cruiser. It was a Lexus LX450. They had the factory selectable lockers front and rear. We took that rig all up over Grayling, the tank trails, things like that. My biggest complaint with an automatic in that one was it seemed doggy. Now, those vehicles are not known for a lot of power,
Yeah.
but I felt, and I always felt, that thing, if it would have had a manual, I would have had a little more guts to get up hills and stuff.
Yeah.
Had 410 gears in the axles, it had the lockers, it was pretty respectable rig.
Yeah.
But that automatic, I felt that just held me back that like 5%, you know? The last one is Project Excursion. Project Excursion is still rocking the 4R100 automatic, which is a pretty decent automatic transmission.
Yeah.
But that's the one that's giving the most problem on the trail. I think maybe I talked on a previous podcast. We were we were west side of Michigan. We were running a bunch of sandy trails. We were tail gunning for a group of quads, 4-wheelers, go-karts, things like that.
ATVs, UTVs kind of
Yeah, whole bunch of... We were tail gunning. We had a couple kids in the back that couldn't ride the ATVs. We were tail gunning. They were going so fast, we couldn't run them for low. We had to run them for high. And we ended up overheating the transmission so badly, we puked out all 15 quarts or whatever that thing holds of ATF. We ended up having to literally hitchhike via cell phone CB and a couple of like, hey, what are you doing? 15 miles
You had to,
back.
hey, mister that?
Yeah. Back to a store.
Nice.
Bought a case of ATF. Overpriced because it was like this country store,
Yep.
Came back, filled her up, and it survived to this day, although sometimes it slips and sometimes it doesn't like going in reverse. But we're talking almost 100,000 miles later.
Yeah.
But Project Excursion
See, now it had a manual, it probably wouldn't have overheated.
would not have. I can guarantee if I had swapped that ZF6 that I wanted to into that, we would have not had that problem. But knock on wood, man, she got it.
It got you through it. It did
got
what it
us
needed
through,
to
it got
do.
us back.
Yeah.
But, those are the only 3 automatics, and yet over the years, I have wheeled with Suzuki Samurai 5-speeds and V4500s. I've wheeled with AX15s. I'm trying to think of any way back in the day, old Willys 3-speeds, things like that. But, for me, I'm a manual guy.
Yeah. And always have been. Once I learned, I mean, that is... So I remember as far back, and I briefly remember talking about it one episode, the first thing I think I ever drove was that old Dakota.
That was an automatic.
Yeah, I know. That's
because
what I'm
I used to own it.
Yeah, I know. So that was, I didn't even have my learner's permit or anything at the time.
Oh,
It was
okay.
all on the back roads or driving in, the field over at Grandpa's and the thing. The first thing I ever drove, I mean, it was still technically illegal. I didn't have a permit or anything.
Sure.
I learned how to drive Project XJ, in the fields, and I used to drive that. And I live in the middle of nowhere, so some down the back roads to my buddy's house or other places. That was the first thing I learned, and from then forward, that's what I've always loved. And yeah, almost anything else I've driven besides my Jeeps was automatic.
Okay.
But, at the end of the day, it always comes back to that.
Yeah.
That's what I really learned and got experience driving first was that. That mindset's always there. And there was an instance, in the truck, my buddy and I were hauling a load of scrap to the scrapyard. And I'm coming up a hill. So I've got some decent speed coming up this hill. And it was quite literally a church bus full of people. Last second decided to just make the turn into the bank. And I slammed my left foot down so hard, my buddy starts laughing. My right foot hit the brake. And, I mean, everything locked up is screeching. All the metal slammed forward, scratched the crap out of the cab. And thank God, or whoever deity anybody follows, that bus decided last half a second to swerve back into their lane, or I would have collided into a bus, a church bus full of people. I've never had my heart racing so fast in my life as that moment. And, we get through I'm laying on the horn and all this, and we get through the intersection and we're on our way. Calm down. And my buddy goes, I heard that. Says, what? He goes, I heard you slam that left foot right into the floor. I thought you went through it. You build up that muscle memory. That's what you do.
We have a mutual friend, Jason, not the Jason you're thinking of, the Jason that sits on the board.
Yep.
I drive like an ass sometimes. And so when he's riding shotgun, I don't know how many times I've seen him slam and he hasn't driven a stick regularly in probably 7 years.
Yeah.
I'll see him jam his left foot and then his right foot down to the floorboard.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing, dude?
My quick other side story, my Jason.
Yeah.
I remember a story from him. He was driving around town with his girlfriend, and he was, I don't remember the vehicle he was in. It was after his Focus, and it was an automatic, though.
Okay.
And he was sitting at the intersection, and, he's sitting there, and the car's just revving up. And he's like, what the hell? It's not going. Well, when he got there, he just instinctively, shoved the stick into neutral. Mm-hmm. And then when he tried to go, he had grabbed a pop bottle. Tried to shift the pop bottle.
Oh, man.
Sitting there going nowhere, and then he realized what he did, and he put it in drive, and he was fine.
I'll end it on this. We've talked on the show before about how I've done a lot more wheeling trips than you have.
Oh, yeah.
Not comparing or anything, but...
No, you've got many more years of wisdom.
You call me old?
No. I said you're a lot smarter than me. You have a lot more knowledge than I do.
I've probably been, I don't know, conservatively 40 or 50 wheeling trips in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Of all those wheeling trips, I have seen a transmission failure probably a dozen times.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time it's been an automatic, with exception of a clutch failure in my own rig up in Marquette, up in the UP. My buddy Bernie, who I know is a listener, rescued me.
Nice.
But that was, I don't know, man. A dozen for one. It seems like the odds are.
I like that ratio.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They seem to be more reliable on the trail.
Yeah,
but
just a bit.
Ending on that, John, I see you got your sheet. Is
Yep.
there anything else you want to say?
Just make sure you tune into Patreon this time afterwards for the after show. So we might make this one available for everybody, as well as our Patreon listeners still, of course.
Sure.
Just tune into that, and hopefully it's going to work how we're planning it, and it's going to be a good time.
The best laid plans, but, I don't know. We've never been known to be real accurate on this stuff.
We're going to wing it, and we're going to see what happens.
Sure.
I kind of live by that
What else
principle.
you got, buddy?
So, nothing but on that note, I'll say if you do have any questions or comments about any of our episodes or this one, feel free to join our 4x4 Facebook page, 4x4 Talk page on Facebook, I'm sorry.
Correct.
And leave us a comment or your question. You can find out, just quick search 4x4 Talk, join the page, a couple quick questions, get you on there, and we'll go from there. Again, as we just mentioned, make sure to check out patreon.com/wheelinradio. Access as low as $2 a month. Get access to a lot of cool stuff. And then if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the video and subscribe so you see more future content from us. And as always, and of course, thanks for listening and have a good one, everybody.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
Something you don't have on your page there. If people are interested, we talk a lot of history stuff. If you're interested in 4x4 history, the Facebook group 4x4 Museum.
Okay.
Check that one out.
Yeah.
It has just about as many members as 4x4 Talk.
Excellent.
Enter that one, and you see a lot more history posts on there.
Good call. Good call. Well, check it out and let us know what you think.